Thanks for joining today. My name's John Boddy. I'm the head of fashion and textile at Falmouth University. And today's presentation is around some of the more challenging aspects of the fashion industry. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen so that we can start a presentation. Great, there we go. So in order to start this topic, we need to ask the question, what is fashion? And we did some work around this in our department, and we decided that we wanted a very distinct answer to this question. And what we arrived at is this notion of fashion being a conscious expression of the times through clothing. So conscious being having an awareness, having a response to the times, the things that are going on, and basically being awake and using our eyes as designers in response to the changing world. And so if we ask that question right now, what is fashion in the context of the times that we're living in? We've been through some big changes in the last 12 months. We might decide that, you know, these images here are representative of the current times that we're in, which speak of change, evolution, and about consciousness, about being awake and aware. We often refer to this trend forecaster, Lee Edelkour, who is her work is she looks at the things that are happening in the world and then decides how designers might respond to that in the future. So she's a futurologist, she's a trend forecaster, and she's written something called an anti-fashion manifesto, which she states in this anti-fashion manifesto that the current state of fashion is obsolete, it no longer works, it needs to change. And within that anti-fashion manifesto, she is shining the spotlight on the ethics, the sustainability credentials, and consumer consumption that surround the contemporary Western fashion market and industry. And so if we think about what the fashion industry is in 2021, we have to look at the impact that it's having on the world if we're being conscious and we're reflecting on the times. So these are just some of the challenging points that could be raised around the fashion industry, and that might be around the environmental impact of the fashion industry. It could be around the psychological, social, ethical, moral impacts that the fashion industry has on the world. It might be looking at things like why we're using animal skins and farming animals to create clothes for ourselves, and we have technology that can create something alternative. It might be looking at the idea of child labour or pollution in global communities. It might be the way garment construction workers are looked after. It might be around racism and cultural appropriation. So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And the first thing that we're going to talk about in the context of the global fashion industry is this notion of fast fashion, and primarily fast fashion production, and i.e. how it's made. And fast fashion, for those that don't know, is inexpensive clothing that's produced rapidly by mass market retailers in response to the latest trends. Unfortunately, the statement on this slide is absolutely true. Fast fashion kills. And this is a garment manufacturing facility in Bangladesh called Rana Plaza. It's a 6-story building made of concrete, and each floor was filled with factories, hundreds of workers every day making clothes for the fast fashion market. This is the same building on April the 24th, 2013, and the building collapsed when it was full of workers making clothes. And it left 1,134 people dead and 2,500 people injured. And it collapsed because the building was unsafe. There were unregulated working conditions, and it existed primarily to feed the Western fast fashion market. We're also going to look at the environmental impact of fast fashion. We can't talk about the fashion industry unless we think about this.
thousands of tons of fish. Oh, there's a camel. There's been this claim that the garment industry is the second worst polluter in the world. I find that utterly staggering. This disaster took place at the Aral Sea, and that's where I'm heading now. So this is a map of the Aral Sea, quite impressive, even on the screen. Enormous, like half the size of England.
We are driving on the seabed now.
Right now?
Yeah. We have been driving for half an hour.
Half an hour. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the problem here. To the right of us,
That used to be the coastline.
is that camel? Are they camels?
Yes.
I feel like this portrays perfectly what's gone on here.
And so the video you've just seen there is it's demonstrating how the cotton farming market and the cotton processing requirements for fast fashion have drained a sea the size of Wales to allow us to buy cheap, fast clothes. And you're also here. You're looking at rivers that have been polluted by textile processing factories. So dyeing of cottons, dyeing of polyesters, factories that put different finishes onto our clothes, like different finishes for jeans. And often, because these are unregulated facilities, they use local watercourses to drain away a lot of the toxic chemicals. And these rivers are they're used by local communities as their source of drinking water, cooking water, cleaning. So the pollution that is going into those rivers is directly affecting them in their everyday lives. A lot of the clothes that are made for fast fashion, this is 24%, this research is telling us, cannot be resold, reused or recycled because of the poor quality of them. So they end up in landfill. And now these are interesting figures around how long it takes these textiles to break down once they're in the landfill. So it takes 1 to 3 years for cotton fibres to break down. It takes 5 to 10 years for wool fibres to break down. 30 to 40 years for nylon to break down. And 100 years for polyester to break down. And polyester is the most popular of all synthetic fabrics, and it's used for much as cotton. And it's also worth noting that a cotton garment will have been constructed using polyester thread. So imagining a t-shirt breaking down in 1 to 3 years is actually not true, because the threads would remain for another 100 years. What you're looking at here are polyester microfibers. And every time you put a load of dirty laundry into the washing machine and the cycle runs, at least 700,000 of those microfibers are released through the pipes of your washing machine down into the water processing, and it ends up basically in the sea or in the rivers. And the creatures that are in the sea and in the rivers are then consuming those microfibers. And then if we choose to consume those fish, we then consume those microfibers. So what's now happening, because of our kind of like indulgence in fast fashion, is that we are eating microfibers. This is what we're consuming now, and we don't actually know the long-term effects of those microfibers being inside of our bodies. We also can't talk about contemporary fashion if we don't think about the psychological impact of fashion. So we live in a world where, you know, our phone has become our mirror and our way of communicating with everybody. We're using things like TikTok and Instagram continually, looking at self-image, our identity, and looking at other people's self-image and identity and how that is sold to us through brands. And we're still being sold a terribly unhealthy self-image through the fashion media. So really super thin, undernourished girls selling clothes as an aspirational body image. This is an Yves Saint Laurent advert of recent times, which was banned in the UK because of the unhealthily thin model. There are constant narratives in the press around people that are working in fashion having anorexia and other eating disorders triggered by working and looking at that fashion industry. Here again is another headline where it's saying that the fashion industry still encourages anorexia. We also can't talk about fashion unless we think about fashion and culturism and cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is when a particular power dynamic in which members of a dominant culture take elements from a culture of people who have been systematically oppressed by that dominant group. So, namely white people oppressing people of colour. So at the top you can see a fashion campaign that uses Native American sacred garments to sell garments. And you're seeing a Hindu Sikh's turban on a Gucci catwalk on a white model. And then you're also seeing this really kind of disgusting representation of Black history on a model on a catwalk. So, you know, that's the tip of the iceberg. But ultimately, what needs to happen is change. And one of the things that we decided to do in our department was we decided to make a statement that was responding to all of those things that I've outlined today, and we've decided to name that our Conscious Practice Manifesto. So it's our methodology that is going to underpin everything that we do in our school, and we've written this as in the Fashion and Textiles Institute we encourage creative consciousness. Our practice is driven by the environmental, ethical and moral challenges of our time, and we aim to make positive change in the world. And then we broke this down into the 4 headings, and we decided one of them was going to be people. And with that, we're saying we are curious, responsible and aware. We decided to look at place, where we might develop community and respond to locality. We decided to think about practice, the things that we do, the things that we make, where we would take risks and challenge the status quo. And we also decided that we would become better through partners and we would thrive by working together. Ultimately, we know that the choice we make as a designer, as a fashion practitioner, as a fashion photographer, stylist, or as an educator or a fashion student, every choice that we make has an impact, and we can decide for that to be a negative impact or a positive impact. Ultimately, we decided that conscious practice for us should be progressive, it should be forward thinking, it should always be exciting, you know, it should bring joy. Fashion is also about, you know, the way we present ourselves to the world. It's a joyous thing, it's about colour and materials. It should be challenging, it should challenge all of those norms, all of those things that have gone on for so long that we've discussed today. It should be experimental, it should be functional as well. We really believe that good fashion is something that helps you exist in a day-to-day. So it could be a really great raincoat, or it could be a pair of trousers that you can wash hundreds and hundreds of times, but they still remain looking the same through really great textile technologies. It should be diverse and inclusive in everything that we look at. It should be clean, it should be as respectful to the earth as we can be. It should be ethical, responsible, respectful, and most of all, it should be timely, it should be contemporary, it should be responding to those times that we talked about in the initial statement around what fashion actually is. So for people, what we decided that we would be looking at in our department was a broader range of people in the context of fashion. So people of colour, people of different shapes and sizes, people of disability, people of different genders, new gender types. We like to listen to people that are making noise as well. So we're listening to people like Greta Thunberg and her sustainability noise that she's made globally. We're also interested in people like Edward Enninful, who's the first Black editor of British Vogue. With place, we're developing community and responding to locality. The first picture is representative of a really exciting project that we have on our campus, which is a natural dye garden. And in that dye garden, we're growing plants that can be used to dye textiles without using really harsh chemicals. So we're creating a very local textile factory, if we want to call it that. And this central image is at Kynan's Cove on the Lizard in Cornwall, not too far from our campus. And I think what's important for our students is that they get to engage with this amazing environment. It's completely different to being in the city, and that has an impact on their work and their respect for the earth and the things that are happening at the moment. And the last picture on this slide is some of our students working in the studio, surrounded by placards and posters that they made, that they used on a Extinction Rebellion march at the start of the term last year. And when we think about practice, we think about the things that we make, the things that we do. And we like the idea of taking risks and challenging the status quo. So coming up with new innovative solutions. And these are some of the ideas that we like. So the first image is an outfit by a designer called Christopher Rayburn, who uses dead stock, old unusable materials. This is an outfit that's made out of old parachutes from the army. We love the idea of breaking the rules around what a model could be. You know, celebrating diversity, disability, different colours, different cultures. We love textile innovation, so we really like this dress by a designer called Iris van Herpen, who's pushing the idea of sustainability and longevity in clothing. And that's a similar story for the last picture, which is a jacket that was made by one of our students in our department, who was interested in the idea of making clothes that would last for a long time and transcend trends, and therefore reduce the need for buying more and more clothes. And ultimately, we really like working with partners. So that could be outside of our department or within our department. The first picture is a garment that was produced in collaboration by a textile design student and a fashion design student. So she made the fabric in the textile department on a loom, really beautiful fabric, and then the fashion student worked with that fabric to make the garment. So it was a lovely piece of teamwork that happened, and that happened in those studios, which is the picture on the far picture on the right, which is where all of our students were interacting together, seeing what each other are doing and having like informal conversations where something like that jacket might emerge. And the picture in the middle is from a brand that's based in New York called Ryan Roche. And we reached out to the brand because we felt that their principles were very similar to the ones that we have in our school. So they work with vegetable dyes. They work with women's cooperatives in Peru to deliver their buttons and make embroideries. It's a very progressive fashion brand, and we partnered with them on a second-year design project this year. I mean, if you're interested in the things that we've talked about today, there are some things that you can start to do to make just to make a little bit of noise. And so if you do want to be part of a better fashion future, the things to think about are getting rid of the things that are outdated and welcome the new. And as young people, you know what's outdated and you know what's coming. Learn and understand the devastating impacts of the current industry practice. I've only touched on a few things today. You know, they're very far-reaching. The more you understand things, the more you can make change. Be forward-thinking and bold. Don't be afraid of making sound and making a noise about the things that you believe in. Things happen through movement, and the more and more people that are involved, the more we're likely to see change. I think ultimately you need to keep things exciting and innovative, because that's what people want. They're going to be interested in those things. And I think the key thing is to do your research, refresh what you know, keep learning all the time. So you might want to ask yourself, and this is a little exercise that you could undertake, actually write these questions down and write the answers to them. What does conscious practice mean to you? What have I talked about today that you might think, actually, that really chimes with me, and I'd like to look into this more. what is the relationship between this thinking and your own design interest? You know, you might be thinking now about just stepping out into a new and you know, into the next part of your education and what that might look like and what that subject area might be, and can you apply this, you know, this concept of conscious practice to the thoughts that you're having now and take them into the future. And so with that, how do you intend to embed this ethos in your own developing design practice? How might you take that forward? How might you be somebody that changes things? And I would say create a sketchbook or a scrapbook, however you want to do that, that focuses on this idea of conscious practice. Just keep gathering, write notes in there. You're refreshing, you're researching, and you're learning all the time. Now you can do something on a global scale as well. There's a fantastic organisation called Fashion Revolution. Been around for some years now, and they're challenging on a global scale fast fashion production. And every year they have a week where you could be involved in different activities. You can, you know, connect with people across the world, and their website is fashionrevolution.org. And in 2021, the 19th to the 25th of April is Fashion Revolution Week. And I really urge you to get involved, especially if you've become interested in things that I've talked about today, because they're going to go really, really deep down into all of those areas, and you'll find ways that you can help. So I'm going to say thank you for your time today. I am now, the last slide is a video that was produced by Fashion Revolution, and yeah, be good, take some action, and be those game changers.